you doing? Welcome back to exercise video. This is exercise video number 2. And today we're going to be looking at a bit of a mental workout. And it's all about circle of fifths and playing in a row all the chords that kind of exist in Western harmony. Sounds like a lot, but all the major chords that exist in the keys that we play in, all in a row. And the idea is that each chord serves as the root chord, and then it serves as the 5 chord going to the next. So it kind of has a double purpose as we go. So first thing I want to talk about is just the actual chords we're looking at and how each one moves to the next. So the beginning, you'll probably hear some chords that you already know and that you heard of. And then you're going to get into some weirder territory. Though every chord in here does have a use in bluegrass. You hear it at some point in some song, in some key. And then you'll kind of come back out into chords that are familiar. We're going to go into the flat keys first. For those of you who don't know, some keys that are flat keys, because they have flats as some of the notes in the scale, are F, B flat, and then some weirder ones, E flat, A flat, G flat. Those are all keys that have flats. A lot of them have flat in the name too. And then we're going to be moving into the sharp keys, much more common in bluegrass for the most part. G, A, E, B even is very common. So, but we'll start at C, which is neither sharp or flat. It's just a neutral key signature. And if you're confused about any of this, there's plenty of resources online that you can look up some basic music theory. If you haven't heard about this or this is all new to you, it could be good to pause the video and just do a little bit of research on what keys are sharp and what keys are flat and how they work, what is the circle of fifths, all that kind of stuff. And then come back to this and you can see how it applies to the bass. So, without further ado, I'll just play the root of each chord, moving to the root of the next, so we can acquaint ourselves with the sound. So, we're starting with the C on the A string. We're going to play that with our 4th finger. All right? So there's our C. And then C, if you think about the key of F, for those of you who've played an F before, C is our 5 chord in F, right? So the 5 chord goes to the 1. C goes to F, and that's F on the D string. Then you think about, if F is the 5 chord, what's the 1 chord? And it might take you a while, it might be quick, but you can say, oh yeah, B flat. Eventually you'll be able to realize B flat is the 1 chord if F is the 5 chord. Again, this multi-purpose use of each chord. So B flat with our 1st finger on the A string. And then from there it gets a little bit weirder, not really super bluegrass specific. We get E flat on the D string, 1st finger, and then A flat on the G string, 1st finger as well. And that being said, that's a transition chord. That's the moment where you can kind of talk in flats or sharps. Again, if this is confusing to you, just check out the circle of fifths online. When you get to A flat, you could also call that G sharp. They're called inharmonic equivalents is the name. And you'll more often than not see G sharp in bluegrass, not so much A flat. G sharp will show up in the key of B a lot. It's the 6th chord in the key of B. So you'll, something like Big Spike Hammer, when you play that 6th note, that's a G sharp. So you'll see it show up. It sounds weird, but it does exist in bluegrass. So again, we're going to be calling this G sharp, but it is the same thing, A flat, inharmonic equivalents. Okay, so we're into sharp keys now. And then we got C sharp on the A string with our 4th finger. F sharp on the D string with our 4th finger. And F sharp is the 5 chord of B, which I'm sure a lot of you have played in before. That'll be our 1st finger on the A string. B goes to E, 1st finger on the D string. Open A, open D, open G, back to C to close things out. So that's our circle of fifths. And let me just play it one more time all the way through, and then I'll start talking about some different approach options. So again, we're starting with our fourth finger. This is half position when your fourth finger, your pinky, is on the C note. Eventually we move to first position where our second finger will be on the C note. You'll see that switch take place. C, F, B flat, E flat, G sharp, same as A flat, same thing. So G sharp, C sharp, F sharp, B, you can see we're in first position now, E, A, D, G, and then back to C. We'll end that in half position. So that's your circle of fifths. And yeah, you can play the notes in different places. And you know, some of these notes even work in different octaves. You know, we have a super low G note. I decided to keep it really condensed, and you'll see this when I play the bass line. It's very condensed. I don't want to use the super low range of the bass or the higher range. This is this comfortable middle range that sounds really good in most all bluegrass bass lines. So you want to stick to this kind of register, you know. I'd say it's kind of like the open A string up to maybe the B on the G string, kind of an octave and a second range. That's a really good range to stay in for bass lines. It's driving and it's solid, but it's not too heavy. You know, the E string can be really heavy, so use it sparingly. So you'll see it in this bass line. I'm staying in that range. So the first thing that we're applying is just going to be repeated roots, going from chord to chord. Remember the age-old, the number one way to transition from chord to chord, in my humble opinion. And it sounds like this. So that's circling all those different chords using repeated root transition notes. If you have any questions about this, you know, you're watching the video, you're like, oh, how do I do that? And like, how does this work? Send me a message. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has. If you know you're getting into that murky territory, or in the G sharp, C sharp area, and you're like, oh yeah, what's the fifth of that chord and how does that work? Feel free to reach out to me. Also, you know, just in that example, maybe let it roll for a second, hear a chord or two, press pause, play it by ear if you're having trouble with the notation, or you haven't really worked on getting the note names associated with the sound before. Pause it and try to work it out by ear, okay? So that's the first way to go through this. Second, you can actually try using the fifths of each chord, and that'll be easy. There's no new notes because that second note I played on each chord is the fifth. So some chords will use a different octave of the fifth. Remember, it's all about that melodic line. How does the melody that you're creating move? You want it to be as smooth as possible. So sometimes the fifth will be a different octave than the initial one. You'll kind of see that as I go through it. But here's how you can move it with fifths. So there's your circle of fifths, using fifth notes to move from chord to chord. Good example of a different range that I used was on that D chord going to G. Play the D, open A, back to D, but then to get to that higher G, I'm using the A on the G string. So I'm changing the range of the fifth as necessary. And then the last one to try is the third approach. So we're using the third of each chord. This one will be, I imagine, will be pretty challenging for most of you. I'm just thinking about what's a third of a chord. If you're G sharp going to C, what's that third? And take time to work it out. Get some resources online if you need any additional information. I'm just going to play through it. And also, you have me as a resource. Feel free to reach out and ask any questions. So here's the same exercise, but using the third of each chord to move. Yeah, so that's the exercise for the week, folks. As much mental as it is physical, probably even more of a mental challenge. And it's really good. It's good to start thinking about getting that 5-1 motion happening in all sorts of different keys. I can't help but think of something like Salty Dog, if you guys know that tune. That one is a perfect example of how important this circle of fifths thing is to get under your belt. Let's say you're in the key of G, right? So, let me be Salty Dog goes like this. Let me be your salty dog, or I want to hear your man at all. Honey, let me be your salty dog. E to A to D to G. Back, same thing. So it's a chunk of the circle of fifths that we're seeing. This happens a lot of different bluegrass tunes, especially ones with a little bit more of a jazz or blues influence like that. You're going to hear the circle of fifths. So why not give it a shot now? We're all stuck at home. Just try to work through it. Again, feel free to reach out with any questions. Take it slow. Start with your repeated roots. Go to fifths from there, then thirds. And if you're feeling up for it, come up with your own version of transition notes. You can do a little walk up going from chord to chord. You can do like a chromatic walk if you really want to get into it. Do something like a walk up for the whole length of the chord, and you're not really ever playing a root or a fifth. All that stuff's going to be great and really important and applicable. So thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy it. Don't hurt your brain too much. Take it slow. Enjoy it, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.